This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Amateur sports can bring a huge amount of benefit to all of its participants. The Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sports released a report in 2022 that reviewed 9 studies of preschool-aged children in sport. It concluded that participation in some form of organized physical activity positively benefits the development of social skills and allows children to build healthy relationships. One critical component of amateur organized sports is the referee, umpire, or game official. A 2023 article from the Sport Information Resource Centre, based out of Ottawa, Ontario, stated that Ontario soccer saw a decline in referees returning after the pandemic, largely due to referee abuse. That same article mentioned a survey conducted in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia that found 94% of soccer referees had experienced verbal abuse, 35% had experienced physical abuse, and 64% felt unsafe while officiating. Robbie Wong is an amateur soccer referee and former referee coordinator for what was Cliff Avenue United Football Club. He held the position for 3 years from 2020 to 2023 and organized and trained hundreds of young referees. He spoke with me about the reality of officiating amateur sports and what is required to attract and retain young talent. We started our conversation with a moment of levity about how he got his start as a referee.
My dad forced me to do it. I didn't really have much choice in the beginning. He said, "You're doing it," and I said, "I didn't want to," and he said, "You're doing it."
It's as simple as that.
Yep, my dad forced it upon me.
So did you build a passion for it as the years went on?
Yeah, I would say the passion became just being able to, it's kind of like another family as it's grown into. Like, I can say refereeing over the years, I've made a lot of lifelong friends, a lot of lifelong connections that I wouldn't have made without my dad forcing me into this. So it did grow into a passion, which translated to being the head ref for a couple of years, which honestly was more fun for me than reffing because I got to pass on my knowledge and just watch like other young kids go through what I did and just watch them grow as not only referees, but as people as well.
Yeah, and so when as you're obviously going through, when you become a referee, one of the things that you sort of have to just deal with, and it's a fact of life, as we both know, is the abuse and harassment that you receive. Do you remember when you first experienced that?
Probably. So we start reffing when we're like 12 as the youngest. So probably 14, 15 is when you start noticing it. Again, I was very fortunate in my circumstance because, when you start off reffing, you do only stuff within your club. And then I was very fortunate that everyone knew my dad. So I was left alone for that stage. But you definitely start to hear it when you deal with other clubs and stuff. And because they don't know you. And abuse, unfortunately, plays a large role about why lots of kids don't continue on in the refereeing careers because it's hard for 13, 14, 15-year-old kids just to hear adults just shout at them for any decision they don't think is correct. And I can remember that. But my dad would always joke to me as a kid growing up that that no one is as scary as him, which he was right. So in a way, my dad just making a joke about that really eased it off, and I didn't really I was fortunate enough to not feel the effects of the abuse as some other kids unfortunately have dealt with.
Yeah, and I relate to some of that. You then moved into being a ref coordinator for a number of years. What do you remember about dealing with young referees or parents of young referees that were worried about how their kids were being treated?
Honestly, that comes down to the relationship you make with the parents and the kids, because a huge part of that is being there, being visible, being able to support the kids, or just having someone there that's able to support them to make sure they learn in a safe environment, and just intervening when necessary to protect the kids. So I think what helped me most was having those relationships with the parents and having the parents trust that they knew what I was doing was at the best interest of the kid. And also, just because I had that conversation with the parent, you have that conversation with the kid as well. So they're just as involved in the process, the decision-making process, and like what's going through my head, what's going through their parents' head, just so they're involved as well. Because this decision, they're also entitled to knowing because it's their life, and this is a life skill. Because for most, refereeing is like their first kind of job they'll get.
Have you, do you remember ever a specific instance of a young referee choosing not to continue because of the abuse and harassment that they received?
I, fortunately, in my time as a head ref, I was very fortunate where I would say out of the couple of years I did, referee retention was at extremely high. Like I maybe had one or two in the 3 years I did, one or two people not continue to pursue just because they decided to focus elsewhere in life with them going to university or them starting their careers. So refereeing wasn't really in the forefront of their focus anymore. But I can say I was fortunate enough that I had a group, not just myself, but I had a great group of like senior refs that would be around when I couldn't be around all the time, that would help support these refs. And I would say having these senior refs be present and to help de-escalate situations was something that made life easier for me as well. So big shout out to all those people that were involved during the time.
And just going back for a second to how you were saying that you need to foster relationships and make sure that the kids know that they're there for them. Along with fostering relationships, what else did you try and do to make sure that they were cared for? Was it stuff like not moving them up too quickly? Was it making sure that there was always a mentor there for the young referees when they were reffing for the first couple times?
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. Like definitely first couple times when you start off, they're young kids, so they're obviously going to be very nervous. So having that mentor there for the first couple games to help guide them, as well as when they hit the milestones, they move up to do older games or new roles, always good to help be their support. Or, as I like to dub it, babysitting. So there'll be times where they have to run the line. I'd stick a senior ref on them and tell them babysitting duty, and they knew. And again, the senior refs, very understanding about it. That we've all been through it. We've all been babysat. We've all had to do the babysitting. But it's always reassuring for those new referees, especially taking on new challenges, that they feel supported, that there's someone there for them in those moments.
Makes sense. And so looking forward into the future and whether or not you're actually ever a ref coordinator again, in your opinion, having done it, what needs to be done to attract and retain young referees, to not scare them off, to make sure that they stay in the profession long term?
I think it's two things. I think as any young kid, refereeing, it pays good money, so the kids are there to make money, and you have to understand that. And it's kind of a give or take. Like, you want to give them opportunities. Like, yes, I want to help pay you, help give you some money, help you earn money. But at the same time, there has to be that understanding at the kid, like, hey, I want to pay you, but at the same time, I need you to be able to do the work at a comparable level. Like, hey, I need you to be professional when you're reffing, and I need you to show that you want to be here. And then that's how you... And like, okay, I feel good about using this person to referee. And then from another standpoint is, I think from a referee development standpoint, sorry, this leads into another topic I wish I'll get into. I think it can be hard to develop referees if you're not there with them, to watch them grow, to watch them learn, to watch them make mistakes. And because of that, it can be hard to develop referees if the proper structure isn't there, like all parties aren't involved. So it has to be a buy-in as as the head referee, and it has to be a buy-in from the referee to make it work.
Is there anything that needs to happen on the side of the parents or the coaches, and having them understand that they also can potentially play a part in changing this culture?
I think the coaching one is easier to touch upon, because obviously it comes down to, you want the coaches to understand, hey, these are young kids trying to referee, and you shouting, yelling at them is not going to help their development. It's only going to turn them off from it. And and very select few that have that mentality as referees to endure the abuse and harassment will survive. So it comes down at a young age. You need to foster them, build them their confidence as tools as a referee. And then from there, once their confidence is there, you can further develop other skills they'll need. And I think when you touch upon the parents, I think for the most part, parents want nothing but to support their kids. So I think parents do a great job of getting their kids to the game, getting them proper equipment they need. But parent involvement also comes down to a relationship with the head ref and stuff. Like you need to understand, these are kids. They can't get to, for the most part, they can't get to games without their parents. And again, the parents' life isn't just a kid. They have other stuff. They have other kids they have to take care of. So I think it's important that as a head ref, you work your best around the schedule of the parents and the kid to make sure you can get them out to games. And I think that's a great way you can build that relationship between parent, referee, and a head ref.
Perfect. Robbie Wong, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time. Yeah, really.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate your time. For BCIT's The Crow, I'm Gabe Liesi. Thank you for listening to another episode of For the Record.
On Monday, the Canadian Border Services Agency announced the seizure of hundreds of kilograms of meth and cocaine destined for Australia at the Vancouver airport. These seizures are becoming commonplace in recent years. In 2023, the majority of meth trafficked into New Zealand originated in Canada, often disguised as beer or maple syrup. The imports have led to the death of a 21-year-old man with no history of drug use.
One day, Aiden came home with free beer that his boss had given him. He took one gulp.
He was screaming out, I want my mom, I want my mom. I'm dying, I want mom.
Daryl Plackus, a former Speaker of the House and criminology professor, explained to me how drugs originating in Vancouver continue to impact relations with Canada's allies. We've had a lot of pressure from Donald Trump about fentanyl imports. The numbers show that it's very, very low. But do you think that some of this methamphetamine from Canada could be making it to the United States?
Well, I think it would be incredibly naive to assume that it wouldn't. We have a pretty long border. We have a pretty easy, it's not exactly complicated to get stuff across the border. People are doing it all the time. I think it's a bit more complicated if you're a seasoned drug producer, but we can also be reminded of what happens with the cartels out of South America and Mexico. Like, okay, so you just blew one of my ships out of the water. You just stopped a ship and seized tons of cocaine and marijuana. Well, that's just a drop in the bucket for them, because that's all figured into the math. Like, let's send 50 ships and yeah, a couple are going to get stopped, but there's still the rest getting in. The drugs are getting in from somewhere. And
Right.
all I would be saying is it's for somebody to say that we don't know what's going across the border. I would say, well, how do you know that? How do you know that? And if you do know that, then you must know who the producers are, and you must know where they're sending the drugs. Therefore, why aren't they getting arrested?
Is this a bit of a like you don't know what you don't know? Is that kind of what you're getting at there?
Well, yeah, that's
Okay.
what I would be saying. I mean, you can't have a situation like when we talk about historically drugs coming into Canada, and we have, a good border security agency, no doubt.
Mhm.
But you can't say that drugs aren't coming in when you're only checking 2% of the containers that are coming in off the docks.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting topic because I mean it would have such huge implications for Canada if Donald Trump was right on something like this. Like it seemed like I personally don't want that to be true. Like I don't think any Canadian does. But it's interesting to hear you use the word naive. Like I guess would you question the numbers that we have?
Because it is again. If I said to you, you're a meth producer, you're a fentanyl producer, and here's your choice. You can either set up shop in British Columbia or Washington State. Well, only a fool would set up in the United States if given that choice.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that? Because if you get caught in the U.S. with that operation, the ease at which U.S. drug enforcement officials can investigate drug crimes relative to the complications we have in British Columbia. We have in the prosecution, disclosure, et cetera, which just causes no end of difficulties for police. It just wouldn't make sense to do that. And we do know that, well, with this recent example of, there was drugs, shipped to out of British Columbia to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, part of it is we also don't know are the drugs that are being exported, are they being produced in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and run through BC, or what exactly is going on there? But one thing we know for sure: if somebody wants to establish a capacity to produce drugs, there are plenty of places in BC that you could do that where you're out of sight. There's no question about that. And again, the security blanket those people have is if you are caught, the consequences that adjoin that are minuscule relative to what would happen to you if you're caught in the United States. So
Yeah.
that's why I say when somebody says, well, there's nothing being produced here and there's none going across the border, I find it a bit incredulous when, the U.S. talks that, it's all coming in from Canada, there's huge amounts. Well, I would say to them, well, how do you know that too, right?
Yeah. Do you think we're gonna find out that perhaps that has been happening? Is that your? I mean, I understand there's probably no data to support that, but is that your hunch, like from the people you would know in law enforcement and the Border Services Agency, that kind of thing?
Well, I would say I would agree with police officials in Canada who say the incident of exportation into the U.S. is nowhere near as claimed by U.S. authorities. And I would say one thing which should point us towards that likely being the case is that if the United States is so sure about that, where are the arrests to back it up?
Right.
Where are the arrests? Because you can't just willy-nilly say this is happening. Because if you're so damn sure that it is happening, then you must know exactly where it's coming from. And you would have known if you arrested people in the United States. You can go back to what I said before about the power that U.S. prosecutors have with the sentencing at their back, that they can have all kinds of telling information. So the other part of that is, that the U.S. is not, arguably not being fair on, is when they make these claims, it's also very true that we're seizing shipments of drugs coming into Canada from the U.S.
Right.
And if somebody did the math and said, okay, let's just consider over the last 5 years how many arrests, border seizures were made by Canada customs immigration officials versus the U.S. Now, if you had those numbers, that's one indicator, but it certainly isn't the whole, and it isn't by any stretch the whole indicator. We have to remember that the population in the United States is 10 times what it is in Canada. Now, the drug population, I think, is not quite matches ours, relatively speaking, but it's not exactly far off. So you say, well, they have, just say hypothetically, they have 8 times the number of drug users that we do. So there's their demand level. And are they making the claim that demand is satisfied by Canadian drug producers?
Right.
It's
a huge market. So. Yeah.
And especially if you there's lots of references for this where in the United States, they have pretty sophisticated mechanisms for tracking movement of drugs across states and where the highest drug use is in various states. Is just not consistent with that past data and the analysis that they've done to say that somehow Canada is the big producer. Not happening.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Pelikas. I'm going to leave that there because we've covered quite a bit. I really appreciate your time.